Today in the Daily QCI, we're going to start talking about fitness or wellness or sickness or what that continuum might look like. Those of you that have been following CrossFit for any number of years may or may not have seen the sick, well, fit curve that Greg Glassman shares as one of his models of health, I think is what it's called. So we are going to share that curve, talk about that a bit today, and look at how you can decide where you might be on that. Maybe mention a few biomarkers that can be measured, and hopefully inspire you to act. So first, the curve. On one side, we have sickness. Up in the middle, we have wellness. And then on the other side, we have fitness. So sickness, I think, is relatively self-explanatory. We have a sickness problem in the country and the world these days. There's no question that we are sicker now than we've ever been across a number of different biomarkers. We're only going to talk about a few of those today. On the other end of the spectrum, fitness doesn't necessarily mean healthy. So fitness is oftentimes an extreme. In order to be the fittest in something, whether that's cycling, running, weightlifting, an Olympic event, CrossFit, high rocks, you name it, being at the top of the game in those oftentimes represents an imbalance in the overall health of the individual. And that might be something like joint pain. It could be other biomarkers that just get out of whack over time. So my focus is going to be to have you ask yourself questions. Ask yourself, how am I? Am I sick? If I am, what, why, and how? How do I get well? Or do I want to be fit? Am I striving for something bigger and greater in my fitness journey? One piece of this is going to be the quantitative versus qualitative. So some of the things we'll talk about are measurable. You can measure grip strength. Supposedly that is an indicator for longevity. You can measure blood pressure and body fat and bone density and cholesterol. All these things have ranges that we would consider healthy or not healthy, with some variation based on the individual. But there's also the qualitative. How do you feel? Do you feel well? And why or why not? So as we're thinking about that, you're going to have to think about yourself. Take a good look in the mirror and figure out what might be going on. And this is where then mental health comes into play. So are we depressed, approaching burnout, something like that? That is what is lacking from this current curve that we're going to throw into the mix. So I'm going to start with the last thing I mentioned. How do you feel? Poke around. How do you feel about when you do an activity? Can you go for a walk and be comfortable? Can you go up and down stairs? Can you ride a bike? Can you lift weights? What do those things feel like? Next, just a few biomarkers. So resting heart rate. Depending upon where you look, the range for healthy could be anywhere between 60 and 85. Resting heart rate is something that you would measure immediately upon waking up, before you get out of bed and get the heart going. That you would be laying in bed, wake up, measure your heart rate. If it's below 60, that typically is going to be a sign of being fitter. It's rare that would indicate a health condition. If it is over 85, that could be cause for concern, especially as it gets over 100. So pay attention to that. And if it is over 100, reach out to your medical practitioner. All right, healthy blood pressure. The number for healthy has been the same, I think, for a really long time, 120 over 80. But being in dentistry, I've noticed that the indications for concern have changed a number of times in my career. and I'm sure more before that. So now we have from the Mayo Clinic, if your systolic is 120 to 129, but your diastolic is below 80, this is a sign of elevated blood pressure. So that it doesn't take much to be in that just slightly elevated category. Stage 1 hypertension is 130 to 139 over 80 to 89. And stage 2, 140 or higher and 90 or higher. So the thing to keep in mind here, it doesn't have to be both numbers. You can look at either number as a cause for concern. Next up, and a big one these days with the obesity epidemic being what it is, the body fat. We'd love to see men somewhere between 10 and 20%, women 20 to 30%. Again, that's talking about just having a healthy percentage. Fitness individuals, especially if you are into bodybuilding, may carry a lot less than that. On the sickness side, you can be sick and still have that level of body fat percentage. So this is a good one because higher body fat percentage does correlate with a number of different health maladies, but it's not a absolute. Okay, then some other fun ones. So VO2 max has gotten a lot of press these days. People like Peter Attia and others have talked about how VO2 max, there's some research out that shows having a high VO2 max is a correlate to longevity. Same with one I mentioned earlier in this, where grip strength is an indicator or correlate to longevity. And I think that's maybe just telling us that being strong is a correlation for living long. Never hurts to lift a little bit. Okay, so let's say that you are towards the sick end of the curve and you want to get healthier. How do you do that? Simple but not easy. 1, move more. Moving every day is critical. It's a game changer. And that can be as simple as a 10-minute walk. If you're currently doing nothing, adding a 10-minute walk every day is going to benefit your body and your brain. So just add that in. As you grow from that, turn that 10-minute walk into a 20-minute walk. Or if you don't have a spare 20 minutes all at once, do multiple 10-minute walks. So for example, one of the biggest game changers is a 10-minute walk after every meal. So if you have 3 meals a day on average, then a 10-minute walk after each meal means that you are getting 30 minutes of activity in. If that activity can be outdoors, even better. There is a lot of benefit to some outdoor exposure, whether that's sunlight or nature in general. Next, pay attention to what you're eating. So quantity matters, and that's number 1. And then the quality matters. So quality can be the breakdown of macros, so how much protein, fat, and sugar are you getting, and how much do you need, and then how many veggies of various types are you getting? Are you eating a rainbow of colors, or are you eating Big Macs 3 times a day? You don't have to go grass-fed, organic, etc., etc. at this point. If you're looking to just go from sick to well, there are some very simple, inexpensive changes you can make in diet to have a profound impact. And next, measure your progress. I think that there is value in measuring what matters. So pick a few of the biomarkers and work with a professional on how to get those on track. Or look at the scale, check it once a week. Get a journal and track your movement. How much are you walking or running or cycling or crossfitting or Orange Theorying, whatever it might be. Track that over time. All right. Finally, celebrate the small wins. Don't beat yourself up too much. We all make mistakes, and just be honest with yourself. Where did the mistake come from? How can you avoid it next time? What can you do to set yourself up for success? That's it for today. Feel free to share your thoughts. We'll dive into more of this as we go along this year. For now, go take a walk.